most important is not true, probably most unimportant. The important people are sitting there. Thank you very much to all the speakers. It was more than interesting, and especially thank you, Professor Claassen, for guiding the morning session and for making it best possible that your university is supporting this conference. Otherwise, I guess it would not be possible to be here. I'm very lucky for you, Hadja, that you have a rector who knows what he's speaking about. This is not the normal case at the university level, so I'm very happy. Thank you very much. Give them a hand again, please. I want to jump straight into the plenary session. When we were thinking about today's topic, actually we were driven by two facts. First, we recently created a commission around precision livestock farming. The president, Ilan Halachmi, is somewhere here, and he will guiding us through the morning. And secondly, we published in Animal Frontiers an issue about precision livestock farming. Animal Frontiers is the chief editor is Jim Sutton. He is somewhere around, you can talk to him. It's a jointly published thing between our friends from the United States, the American Society of Animal Science, the Canadian Society of Animal Science, and the American Meat Science Association. It is free, you can download it from the website, and I would like to stimulate it to do so. All the issues are available, and they're very interesting. We spread them around the world. We try to inform decision makers, politicians, and I think all the issues are more than interesting. If I talk about publication, I have to mention Animal, because we're very proud of Animal. And I want to thank and take the chance to thank the chair of the management board, Nigel. He's unfortunately not here today, but I'm very happy that the editor-in-chief is here. I've seen her somewhere, Isabel. Isabel, please stay up. She's here, and she's doing a lot of work, and I can simply say without her, Animal would not run like this. Also want to take the possibility to thank INRA, who is giving us the possibility of the use of Isabel. She's full-time working for Animal, and full-time means 150%. Thank you very much, Isabel. She will be around. You will find Cambridge University Press, and if you have any questions, any comments, whatever you want to talk about, go there. Isabel will be around, and also Adam. It is 10 years ago that we started Animal together with INRA and the British Society of Animal Science, and I can say we're very successful. The impact factor is high, and we reached the top level of the journals dealing with animal science. This is, of course, based on the fact that the section editors are doing a very good job, the authors are doing a very good job. I want to stimulate you to send all your papers to Animal. But I want also to stress the fact that reaching an impact factor at that level is also based on the work of the reviewers. And it is not easy to find reviewers. Therefore, I want to stimulate you all to review papers whenever you get one. Before you press the decline button, think twice about. It's a part of our work, and we need you to review the papers. Otherwise, we can't maintain this high level of the journal. Visit the webpage. It's new, it's interesting, very informative, and you will find all the information which are needed on this page. Ilan, I would like to ask you to come up here on the floor already. Ilan Halachmi is the president of the newly created Commission of Precision Livestock Farming. He's from Israel. He's working at the Volcani Center, and he's dealing with these topics already since many years, specialized in the field. We're extremely happy that he took over the commission and he took over the plenary session. He will guide you through the morning. Please come up.
Okay, I'm very happy to see you all here. Actually, hardly see you, but I hope you are here. We are going to, at the end of the day, you will all know something about PLF. PLF is relevant to almost every aspect here. You can monitor physiology status, nutrition, early detection of health, of course, quantifying animal welfare. So I hope at the end of the day, you will know something about PLF and take a decision if it's relevant to you, or you can ignore it, but at least you will know what you miss. We are going to have two types of presentation. theory by Sheizaf Rafaeli and Karel van Ellingreider. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Not really? You can fix it later on. And then two presentations about the application of Jeffrey Guly from the US, from the Kentucky University, and from Orin Bar, SCR, about the industry point of view. The day continue in session 21, where we will go to other aspects of PLF. There are quite a few aspects related to it, but I will explain it later on. So what is PLF? We are all using the term PLF, but do you really know what is PLF? PLF is indeed based on technology, on monitoring technology. There are many places where you can monitor physiology, nutrition, health, and welfare. This is just a regular cow that I took in the Vulcani Center, but I'm sure there are even more places for monitoring. But what should you monitor? This is a question. And to make sure that we are not overflooded with data, but starve for knowledge, this is the expertise of the PLF. So the PLF just starting with technology, and it's not only technology, it is complete management concept. It starts with some biological process. Our biological process could be chicken, could be pig, could be cow or horse. It could be fish, but in the case of fish, we are not going to the individual fish, but for a group, more like poultry or pigs, that you can manage a group. The point is something that you can manage, not monitor for getting data, but monitoring for managing. And then, after you manage to monitor, you have to look at the input. The inputs are the management, the regular management in the farm, the nutrition, the ventilation, the handling, all the things that usually you manage a farm. And there is output to this biological process, the behavior, the physiology, the group, the production. And what you do with the output, this is where the sensors are getting in, activity, temperature, rumination, heart rate, all of this. And then, this is the most important point, you have to do something with the sensors, and this is where we are going into the model. We should have some model, some boundary where the measurement should be. For example, if the temperature, let's take the poultry, is more than 39 something or 49, or depend on your species, when it's going out, you should do something. And then what you do when the measurement goes wrong? Back to the management. You change something in the management, could be cooling, nutrition. This is the concept, the management concept of the PLF. So what we will have today, we have the theory, and later on we will continue with other aspects of the PLF, but this I will explain later. So now I am happy to call Sheizaf Rafaeli from University of Haifa. You are here. He is dealing with management science, was dean of the faculty more than once, and please.
Good morning, delighted to be here. Thank you for the introduction. Fun to be in Estonia, isn't it? I think I'm the only non-animal scientist in the room. I work on management issues, and my role this morning will be to create the funnel that leads us to a discussion of digital technology in general, something that leads into the P in PLF. So I'm not that much an expert on livestock, but I am interested in digital issues. And what I would like to talk about is digital culture, clutter in the age of big data. I don't have enough time, so I won't show you a few videos, but the slides that I will be showing are available, in fact, at this URL at the bottom right-hand corner, which I will show at the end as well. You will have access to some of the recommendations, readings, books, articles, and such that I will mention, and as well to some of the videos, which I won't be showing you. I have a wonderful video of a flock of sheep, and I have other videos that I will show you later on. But in the interest of time, I'd like to focus on our subject matter. And our subject matter is the use of digital technologies in general and their impact. In your fields of agriculture and animal science, there are a variety of topics in which, as Ilan suggested, the computer and the data fed into computers and the algorithms used to analyze the data fed into computers. There are a variety of fields where these all come together to help in our mission. Some of these are in monitoring, some of these are in managing processes, some of these are in other fields. Many of these are covered in a variety of scientific and technical literature. There's a really good video produced by the British Broadcasting Corporation, by the BBC, a video called The Joy of Data. And in this video, which again, I don't have enough time to show you, there is an interesting discussion of the use of pedometers in the production and management of cows. And again, I won't spend too much time on showing this video. You will have access to this video if you're interested later on. The point, though, of the video, and more generally of my talk, is that we are at the confluence of data, lots of data, computers, lots of computers, algorithms, lots of algorithms, and all of these leading to a new generation where artificial intelligence, that is not just calculations and computation, but a new view of what we know, how we know it, and what we apply in knowledge, a new view of that in its impact on all aspects of life, and for the purposes of this conference, its impact on agriculture. There are many different aspects in which this comes to bear. I would like to take a step back, move our camera lens a little bit to the back, so that we have a broader view, not just focused on agriculture, a broader view where we ask the important questions about both the culture and the clutter that occurs when we bring these data, these computers, and these algorithms to bear on our lives. We have to start with history. As the economist who preceded me suggested, you can't just start with today's data. We need to go back to the processes that led us here, the processes that showed agriculture as a branch of employment dropping very rapidly and very precipitously. The percentage of people employed in agriculture has gone down to single-digit percents in most developed countries. They've been replaced by industrial workers and service workers, but the most interesting part is not available in this graph. The most interesting part of the story requires that we add a fourth line. In addition to the dropping line of agriculture and the rising and then somewhat stabilizing and even dropping line of the percentage of employed in industry and service, there is a meteor rising. The line that indicates the percentage of population employed in the production, manipulation, storage, transfer of information. And even in this audience, even in this conference where most people are involved in agriculture, if you put your hands forward, and I'd like to ask you to do that, please put your hands forward. How many of you have actual grease stains on your hands? How many of you have actually touched agricultural implements in the last 24 hours? And yet you've been working. Information sector has outstripped most other sectors, and that is the background story to the rise of the digital. Whether it's good or bad, loved or not, we are becoming more information-oriented at the expense of all other sectors, not just agriculture, including industry and services and so forth. We are in a field that is inundated by information flows. We are all equipped here, even in this room, with screens. Most people have stepped into this room with at least one screen, many people with 2 screens or more. We are involved in using screen-based technology. Many of us have smartphones, tablets, laptops, internet-connected devices. watches that are connected to the internet. We are much more connected to these sorts of technologies as part of our work, as part of our productive life, than we had predicted even 10 years ago. And what we need to think about are some of the dangers. These technologies explode, they go bad, they cause harm, they are problematic, not just promising. The problems and the promises, the pains and the gains are what I'd like to talk about. This notion of the digital creating a new environment, one that we did not grow up in. Certainly our parents and grandparents did not know, and so we need to prepare ourselves for this new reality, a reality where suddenly we are inundated with information that should be put to good use, information that has predictive forms and functions in our life, and information that could also be sometimes perceived as threatening. There's a really good article in this last May's issue of Agricultural Science, an article that I will mention now and will return to at the end of my talk, an article that I'd like to recommend, an article that talks about the smart sensing and monitoring and the smart control and the smart analysis and the other applications of big data. The fact that all of these sensors that Ilan mentioned are constantly collecting numbers, they're constantly collecting data. Big data has a huge impact on everything, including on smart farming. It involves the entire supply chain. The sensors produce huge amounts of data. They provide unprecedented decision-making capabilities, and they cause major shifts in roles. We saw the fact that many of us are now working in agriculture without actually touching agricultural products. They change the power relations between traditional and non-traditional players, and there are big new legislative and regulatory issues associated with these big data. And so I'd like to begin with the tsunami of big data. I'd like to begin with the fact that we have this overflow of numbers, of bits. I'd like to begin with the fact that this reality of lots of numbers is one that we did not grow up with, and many of us are not yet prepared for. So for example, for how many of you does this number jump out and express itself in a word? For how many of you, the first glance at this says, oh yeah, this is a billion. So 1 with 9 zeros after it is a billion. More interesting question is, how many of us have internally an understanding of what a billion is? That billion is repeated in genetical research, it's repeated in economic reports, it is repeated in the results of sensors. But how much is a billion? If I were to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, would I reach a billion before the end of my allotted 30 minutes? Would I reach a billion before the end of today? The answer is no. When would I reach a billion? Would it take a week, a month, a year? Would it be before Eaap 2019? Well, actually, a billion, it would take me 32 years if I were to count from 1 to a billion, and if I were to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That gut feeling for what a billion is something many of us still miss. And so the fact that big data are so important, coupled with the fact that we are still not naturally able to deal with these dimensions, is a fact that we need to fix. Let's fix it. Can everyone see the dot? That's 1. And this is? Take us a couple seconds. 100, 10 times 10. And how much is this? $10 times 10, 100, probably 10,000. When will this become a billion? Well, if that little dot were a million, then that slightly larger dot would be a billion. And if we deal with numbers related to genetics, or we deal with numbers related to budgets, or we deal with numbers related to other sensors and what they collect, we are in an area where an entirely new language needs to be developed. We need to learn not just to speak of mega and giga and tera. We need to acquire and assimilate terms like peta and exa and zeta and iota that are not currently easily rolling off our tongues. It is an entirely new language, not to speak of an entirely new culture. And it is this culture, the meeting of where we used to be not very long ago and where we are heading right now. It is this culture that I would like to ask some provocative questions about. I'd like with you to accept the fact that in area after area, bits are replacing atoms. In one field after another, where we used to expect the physical, we are now accepting representations of the physical. And much of our work, much of our productive life is moving to areas where we use expressions of things rather than the things themselves. There are some great promises, enormous gains to be had, and there are also some real threats, enormous pains to be experienced. The transition from atoms to bits is something that characterizes many different fields, including agriculture. Almost everything we do in management, my students who study management grapple with, is transforming from what used to be entirely physical and tangible to something else. And what I would like to map out with you in the next few minutes are the dimensions of this transition. The dimensions represented by the icons in the circle that is around here, the icons that I would like to spell out for you. I'd like to suggest that because we are rapidly moving into a digital culture, and because we would like to reap the benefits of moving into a digital culture and not just suffer the detrimental effects of the digital clutter, I think it's important that we map out the dimensions of this process. And the dimensions of this process I would propose to you are a death of distance, time, and center, with a question mark. Is distance really dying? Is time really being redesigned? Is the center really being erased? Another dimension is a dimension of privacy. Is the availability of networks and data and computers threatening our notion of privacy? And what does that mean? Are we talking to others differently or less or at all? Is conversation changing now that we are all instant messaging, we're all looking at our screens rather than in each other's eyes? I think we should need to ask about the death, or at least a threat of the death, of the tangible, and in particular the death of the book, which used to represent our culture up to the very recent past. I think we need to ask about the death of memory. Do we still remember as we used to? Do we still spend energies on remembering? And maybe the death of death itself. Is life still what it used to be when we can express large portions of it in digital form, put it on a disk on key, Control-C, Control-V, copy it elsewhere? Is singularity really coming? I'd like to propose that we think about the death of choice and a potential death of truth. Is the world of digital still centered around truth? What does science mean, the quest for truth, in an era where the digital has entered science? Is there a death of the way we learn? Are classrooms being redesigned? Definitely they are. Are conferences being redesigned? Definitely they are. Is the classroom, the traditional way in which we learned, over? And lastly, has the technology promised things that are not being delivered? A couple words on each of these topics. There is real hope that time is being redesigned. Not just a move from analog clocks to digital clocks, but a real new control over synchronicity and asynchronicity. We don't necessarily have to be here. This session is being videotaped, and many people are being invited to watch it at a different time. The technology of digital is making synchronicity a lot more elastic, the elasticity of synchronicity. We are also probably building bridges over distances in such a way that distance is shrinking, and some really interesting thought is being put into this. I recommend Karen Cross's book, The Death of Distance. At the same time, I think we should think about what happens to the center when the technology we use, the internet and other digital technologies, works around centers, no longer controlled by central switches. When central switches are being circumvented, we have a lot more pornography. When central switches are circumvented, we have completely different political realities. When central switches are circumvented, we have entirely new forms of currency. The idea of money that doesn't have a state sponsorship is one that 20 years ago would have sounded crazy. It is growing like wildfire. Is the center dying? Is the distance dying? Is time dying? I suggested that we think about privacy. When I talk about privacy, it is both our individual privacy and privacy in the sense of ownership. Can science continue to march forward in an era when we protect privacy even at the cost of scientific progress? And this, in many areas, including in Europe, is what is happening. The directives and regulations and legislation and laws related to privacy are colliding head-on with our older values of transparency and sharing. And the more we value privacy, probably the higher the price we pay in science, medicine, and other fields. Some people think this is a worthwhile choice. Others are very much opposed. In any case, the digital technology is bringing this to the fore. And the issue of privacy, because we have so much technology invested in sensing, videotaping, recording, reporting, looking, and so forth, is a big issue with digital. When you think about the P in PLF, you need to think about P for privacy. We should ask about conversation. This is a matter for an entire seminar, but I think everyone in this room recognizes the icons, the emojis. The icons and the emojis are now replacing what only 5 or 10 years ago were older means of human interaction. And if we're replacing older means of human interaction, we are moving into an entirely new kind of culture. We're moving into an entirely new reality. If conversation is over, then many other aspects of how we live our lives and manage our lives are being threatened. I wish I had enough time to talk about tangibility, but just to say, because bits are replacing atoms, because this is something that makes us adults laugh a little bit, but for 3-year-olds is natural. If you look at a 3-year-old picking up a print magazine and trying to flip the pictures by moving their fingers, because this has become a natural motion, we understand that that which was common sense and expected for our generation is now completely changing. The book is changing as well. We read off screens more often than we do off paper. We are expecting audible books more often. We are reading in smaller chunks and more rapid chunks. Our culture is changing. It is fed by the digital technology, and it will evolve in the next really near future into an entirely different situation. I still remember the phone numbers for my first 4 girlfriends. I don't remember the phone numbers of my 3 sons. I have those phone numbers on my smartphone. No need to commit them to memory. That is a small and insignificant example of the bigger picture of what it is we remember. When I was a very young person and I worked with cows, I remembered the names of the cows. There are many more cows now. The Economist mentioned that some of the farms are 300 cows or larger, but we are redesigning our expectations of memory. More importantly and more interestingly, we're redesigning our expectations of death, of the end of life. The discussion of singularity, the discussion of the ability to inherit culture and identity is moving up quickly. I'll just say that in the context of the death of truth and fake news, there's also a discussion of what is considered true and how we aim towards it, the importance of algorithms in measuring what we know. We move from samples to census. Because data are available on more and more aspects of our lives, we are less bound to sampling and more focused on looking at everyone, because we're able to look at everyone. We have GPS measures, we have recordings, we have these tethers, and we have algorithms that are drawn from these big data. It's a fascinating process to watch, the process where we, in science, are moving from theory that engenders hypotheses that we then test, which is how we all grew up doing science, to a science that is based on data that grows the hypotheses from it. The tools of deep learning are turning science on its head. And when science is turned on its head within the course of half a generation, we need to think about different ways of teaching. The classroom is being flipped. We are rapidly, almost at a blinding speed, losing the old formats of education, moving towards teaching a digital native generation, mostly nowadays still taught by digital immigrants, an entirely new environment. And lastly, this technology, including in some books like the Clutter Manifesto and The Wealth of Networks, both of which I recommend, this technology arrived about 30 years ago with great fanfare and enormous promise. It is an ideologically based technology. The internet promised equality and openness. And the question is that promise being delivered? Or maybe there's a certain forfeit of the promise. Maybe we're getting more selfies than we're getting actual expression of what the promises used to be. There is an enormous amount of literature about this, and I wish I had the time to spell out more recommendations. Let me just suggest that for this audience, among these books, probably the most useful is this very recently issued book called The Platform Revolution, a book that talks about the supply chains and the value chains in a new era of digital culture. The Platform Revolution, out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A few other books, including Everybody Lies, a book about the veracity of big data, and most interestingly, documentaries and also Hollywood. Lots of movies about big data that have come out in just the last 3 years. And these movies are also available on these slides, and I would like to close by returning to that article in this last May's Agricultural Systems, where the discussion is of the ecologies. Venture capital and its relation to big data, the actual farming and ag tech sectors and their relation to big data, and the tech companies and their relation to big data. That is a good source that I would warmly recommend. This source, along with the movies and the books and the other recommendations that I made here, are all available on a course that we're offering on edX, as well as on our slides, the slides on the bottom blue line at bit.ly EEAP CLTR net. Thank you.